Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great day. Thanks for tuning in. So today I wanted to talk to you about assuming that you've just made a game and you're curious about video game PR, basically how to let the world know that you made a game. This is a collaboration of an entire team. I'm just simply the person presenting this to you. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A as well. So if you have some specific questions, maybe about your project, or maybe you have some familiarity with video game PR, but have some specific situations, we'll have time for that as well. So a little bit about us. So my name is Mario Kroll. I am the president and founder of UberStrategist. We've been doing this for about 6 years as an agency, and we have a team that is based in the US and Canada and in Europe. All of our team members have diverse experience. We have a lot of journalism background folks, but all of us in common have a strong background in PR and community outreach for games, entertainment, and technology. Just to give you a little bit of credibility of what we've worked on previously. So our collective team has worked on PUBG, on Elite Dangerous, on RuneScape, on Mad Cats, on Sacred 2, on Halo, on SSX, and also the Tropico franchise. In a nutshell, we've basically worked on everything from the smallest indie to some large AAA titles. And we've also worked in esports, in virtual reality. We've worked on blockchain technology, cloud gaming, and so forth, because basically the gaming industry continually evolves and changes. And one other thing just to note at the end here, we do contribute a portion of our revenue to charitable causes. We also work with a number of charities and nonprofits, and that's how we got involved with Game Jam Plus in the first place, which is a great cause to support. A little bit more about us. So here's just a smattering of brands that we've worked with. These are just assorted games and titles that you may be familiar with. Everything, again, from Atari to wargaming. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between advertising, marketing, or public relations. And I'm going to use the term PR, public relations, and publicity interchangeable. So whenever I say any of those, I mean the same thing. We'll probably refer to it as PR mostly. So if a young man tells his date how handsome, smart, and successful he is, that's basically advertising. If the young man tells his date she's intelligent, looks lovely, and is a great conversationalist, he's saying the right things to the right person, and that's marketing. So that's basically direct conversation. If someone else tells the young woman how handsome, smart, and successful her date is, that's public relation. And I kid here, but basically public relations is relationship driven. It's all about helping you develop a cohesive communication strategy, so you're not just throwing things out there and just messaging things, throwing a press release, but having a plan that goes behind it to tell a story. And the most important part, it is engaging with the press or media and with influencers to help establish or enhance the perception of your organization and its products or services. So the key point there being, it's not about you directly telling the world about how great you are, but it is about you working in a trusting relationship with the press, with influencers, to get them to express how much they like your product and brand, and reaching their audience through that process. All right, let's talk a little bit about what PR is not. It's not user acquisition or sales. We get a lot of clients, especially first-time clients or clients not very familiar with PR, and they say, okay, well, how many unit sales are you going to drive for us? That is not the purpose of PR. It's not advertising or marketing. It is part of the marketing mix, and you should be doing advertising, and you should also be doing marketing. Just doing PR by itself or just doing advertising by itself does not usually get the job done. It isn't community management. It does tie together to your community because you are building a fan following about your game and your product. And just like PR, if you don't start your community management, building a community, building a fandom early on, it's not something you can turn on a dime. And so a lot of our clients, probably just a piece of advice I'd give you here, if you haven't done this before, if you are working on a game and it's going to come out in 6 or 12 months, start working on your community right now, because those are ultimately the people that are going to affect how many units you're going to sell, get you great feedback about the game as it gets developed, and so forth. It's also not some sort of shield or protection for acting poorly or for being untruthful or unethical. Some people think that PR is a way of spinning things, changing the truth. That's not it at all. Not good PR isn't that at all. So it simply amplifies and helps you message things so that you kind of see things in the best light. And it's not magic, although sometimes we do tend to think it has some magical elements, and sometimes some of our clients think what we do is pretty magical as well. But it's simply creativity and a plan, and also a lot of persistence and consistency. Let's talk about what PR is. So it is speaking to your audience through the press and influencers. Again, I mentioned that earlier. It's not you talking directly and touting your horn. It is really about you talking to the press and getting the press to hopefully like your product and talk positively about it instead of you having that conversation directly. It's a lot more influential that way. It is telling your story in a way that stands out. It's very important to always be aware what's noteworthy, what's new. Editors get thousands, if not more, pitches. And so you need to be very clear in how to tell what's cool, what's great, what's unique about your game or your product in a quick way. It's communicating your specific message, again, so others take note and so you stand out from the many games that are out there. It can build or enhance brand awareness. And when we say earned media, basically earned media is anything that you don't pay for. So it's not advertising, it's not marketing. It is things that you do that organically build a reputation for your brand. With that, again, a lot of brand awareness and brand building is considered advertising, but PR is definitely part of that. That means it's sort of a marathon, not a race, but it is a key component. It also helps you increase your potential audience. For example, if you're in a small geographic area, your network may be limited in who you know. By getting out there, by talking to a global audience, talking editors worldwide, they have an audience worldwide. Getting in front of the right outlet, for example, can multiply the total number of customers that could be aware of your product dramatically. And it's also a great tool that a lot of people forget about sometimes for attracting potential partners. If you're hiring talent, maybe finding a publisher, and I'll talk about that more, investors, and so forth. And it can also help with reputation and crisis management. We call this putting the cat back in the bag. Honestly, the best thing to do is never get yourself in trouble. But there are situations where negative things get out there, or miscommunication happens, or somebody says something that was meant a certain way and is taken another way. That's also where a PR strategy comes in place and kind of help prepare for some of those rough spots. Again, back to my earlier point, it's not an excuse for acting dishonestly or not being truthful, but it can help you at least minimize the negative impact when something doesn't go. A simple example maybe is a game that people have been waiting for a long time is delayed. With proper PR messaging, that can be turned into maybe not a positive, but at least isn't something that's strongly negative, because maybe the customers get something extra. And that's the reason, because you wanted to work on something additional that adds value to your customers. So then that's perhaps a legitimate reason why something gets delayed and why customers are okay with waiting a little bit longer. All right, why is PR important? Okay. This is going to be a little bit of repetition here, just driving some of this home. So it can help potential customers learn about a product, and also, most importantly, if it's a fit for them. You can get an objective third party and community feedback. And I put objective in double quotes because, everybody has an opinion. The press, media, influencers certainly all have opinions. Some can be very strongly negative or positive. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But if you build a proper community and if you build press relationships, for example, if you get a game out there and during the beta phase, you see a preview that tells you kind of what they liked about your game and what they didn't like about your game, and you're seeing some consistency in that might be an alert for you to take back to your development team and talk about changes that you can make to the game before release. And then, not to beat this horse to death, but, it can help you avoid to minimize or even minimize the negative impact of messaging missteps, poor communication, and other crisis events. With that, in mind. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. I think we can all appreciate that. It's best to stay out of trouble, but if you do get yourself in trouble, a PR agency or a skilled PR person can help you, make that less severe. PR can also help attract publishers. There are numerous scenarios where we've helped clients with early PR, with a big feature story, for example, in a large magazine during an early stage of a game. And that is something that you, when you're shopping for publishers, could then come to the table and say, hey, look, this magazine or that magazine said these nice things about our game and we're very impressed. And might even get publishers to come to you and seek you out if there's enough coverage and buzz out there early on. It can help attract potential partners, hardware partners, other development partners, accessory partners, lots of opportunities out there that you might be interested in. Investors, in addition to finding publishers, folks asking me about, hey, can you help find funding for a game is probably the next most common question I get. Having good buzz out there about your game can certainly help attract investors. Talent. If you're looking to hire key specific people, specific roles, if you're trying to get some, top-notch developers that maybe might not come to you if they don't know anything about you, that's an opportunity to leverage that as well. And also, it can really help the impact of trade shows or events. Right now, we're not doing a lot of in-person events, obviously, hence we're doing great things like this virtual events from Gamejam+. But during normal times, using PR, you can set up press appointments with editors, with influencers, have people come to your booth. Make sure that it's not just consumers, but also influencers that are at your booth for set appointments so that you can show your game off and hopefully get coverage and so forth. All right, what warrants PR and what kind of scenarios might you think about using PR? All right, maybe you want to announce a new product, and this can either be, usually the best thing to do is to keep fairly hush about a product until a new game, until you're willing to make a big splash. That certainly makes PR easier. I know that some developers will start sharing things with the community for a long time. For example, there are scenarios where maybe a game was funded through Kickstarter or another crowdfunding vehicle, and then it takes 2-3 years to develop, and it kind of goes a little quiet during that time, and then it gets reintroduced. Well, that's also an announcement. That's an announcement officially to the press. That's kind of bringing back or re-announcement. So that's a perfectly viable way to use PR. When you launch a new product, and that includes things like early access, that's basically when consumers can purchase your product in some shape or form. PR is absolutely essential. When you have a significant update to an existing product, a new DLC, a new content, maybe during the development cycle, maybe during early access, lots of different situations where there's new things that you want to keep your game on the radar with the press and sometimes with influencers. When you have some key partnership or some brand that came together that's doing something with you. For example, one of our client, Atari, does a number of different partnerships all the time. They just did one with Six Flags that just concluded, where basically in Roller Coaster Tycoon, you could take Six Flags components from a real world theme park and put those into your virtual theme park. Those updates were obviously great uses of PR to let people know that that's an opportunity. To create visibility ahead of trade shows and events. I've already talked about that, so I'm not going to belabor that, but certainly makes you stand out. It's much better than just showing up at a trade show and hoping for the best. And also sometimes to announce key hires. You hire a person that has a lot of street cred, if you will, within the gaming industry, or has done some impressive things that can help also buy you some additional credibility and get editors to take note of whatever project you're working on now. And also key financial announcements. So, Series A, seed round, you get a large VC or well-known VC to invest in your company. Those are all things that you can announce to get yourself more exposure. Big question. When should you start planning PR? We have a short answer. as early as you possibly can. There's almost never too early. A lot of developers, especially when they're new, when they're starting out, I've actually ran into developers at trade shows where I saw some really cool games and said, wow, I've never heard of this. Like, did you do any PR? And the answer is no, we didn't really think about PR until right before launch. And of course, as I say here, there is very little that really anybody can do, but particularly PR, as well as community. If you don't have some lead time to plan it and to put strategy in place, nothing positive is going to happen, or very little. And after launch, it's pretty much impossible to do anything with PR to help you with the game. All right, here's what we've put together. This is a sample PR timeline. So we don't really do cookie cutter timelines. There are some standard things that we'll recommend. What we do with most of our clients is we have a number of conversations early on. We find out about the challenges and the obstacles, when the game is going to launch, what platform, and things like that. And then based on that, we put together a PR timeline collaboratively. If your PR agency is not working with you collaboratively to put a timeline together, or if you're force feeding them a timeline, you're probably setting yourself up to not ideal success. So prior to PR campaign, that time is very important. A lot of developers focus on the development and the making of the game, but honestly, marketing and launching it and promoting it through PR is just as important, or almost as important. Think about what sets your game apart. When you lock down your messaging, establish key milestones. One of the other things we always ask our clients is, can we see a development roadmap? Like, what major features will you have available when? If we're doing an early access launch and then later a launch, and there's a 6-month window in between, we kind of want to know, how often are you going to have an update, and what kind of update? And the reason that matters is because usually, outreach by itself is just words. So a lot of the outreach, we always want to have visual assets, be it a trailer, be it new screenshots, other visuals that can show, not just tell, what the new updates, the new content is. So if we tie that to the development roadmap, we're pretty sure that you'll be able, for example, to do a short video that maybe shows a new feature that we can then tie to a press release or media alert, much more impactful than you either just unrolling something, having a feature show up in the game and surprising everybody, or sending out a press release without visual assets that actually showcase what that feature looks like in the game. You should plan assets to support each outreach. And this has been consistent throughout. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. And even when I was in-house working at publishers and working with developers, still always it's been a battle to try and get assets. You as a developer should probably plan to have one video of some sort for every single outreach if possible. That's sort of the nirvana. That's what we ask for. It's not always practical, but if you can prepare and set aside and plan for strong visual assets as much as your milestones for development, you're going to have a much better marketing and PR landscape and a much better launch. Develop a fact sheet. We're going to talk about fact sheets a little bit more. It's just a one-page, basically, or a one sheet, some of you may know it as, that just talks about your game that you can present or send to somebody, for example, a publisher or a press, that just gives standard messaging. It becomes important to have the same message over and over again. Doesn't mean you can't iterate it as you unveil more details about a game, but you want to stay consistent with your core points that you want to message about what's cool, what's important, what makes your game stand out. Creating a company boilerplate, that's just a small blurb that goes at the bottom. It's another opportunity to open the door. A lot of people sort of dismiss company boilerplates and don't think about them, but it's really about what makes you as a company stand out. Is it the people that made the company? Is it products you've previously worked out? But do pay some attention to your company boilerplate, because that's going to go in every press release. And it's kind of similar to your About Us statement. Should usually be about one paragraph and be something compelling and succinct that tells people everything they need to know about your company. Assemble an initial press kit. We're going to get into press kits more, but the visual components are as important as the verbal messaging. And something else, again, I've said that before, create your community as well as your social media channels. We have worked with clients where, we're a month before launch and we said, hey, how big is your community? How big is your Discord server participation? Do you have a lot of followers on Twitter? And the answer is not very much. A month or two before you launch a game is too late to launch your community. The other nice thing about community and social media, if you're making multiple products in sequence, maybe if you have a common theme or thread, there's a great chance that your customers of your first game will also be interested in subsequent games. So don't scrap that. Use that existing community, continue to build it, and attract and keep those customers that are following you on social media and in other community tools. And to this, develop a calendar, some sort of general plan for what you're going to do with social media and community. They should be talking about similar things at a similar time with PR. Not to get too deep in the weeds here, but when you're talking to the press, they thrive on news. News means something that the world doesn't know about yet. So if you're sharing all your good gems of information with your community, and I know sometimes it's very tempting, these are your fans, you want to give them all the good nuggets and give them the stuff early on. But if you can hold back and tie that together with your planned PR outreach, still feed your community, still give them nuggets, still give them some unique stuff, but just don't blow up your PR opportunities by doing that. Okay, and I'll answer any questions about that later on. And also start thinking about who are your key outlets. Sometimes that's driven by where you guys think you want to be. Sometimes there are stakeholders, investors that want to see you in a PC Gamer, an IGN, or maybe a Wall Street Journal or Forbes or Fortune. Think about what outlets are important to you and for what strategic reasons. And tying into that, develop a contact list of press as well as influencers. And I'm not going to dive too deep into influencers today because we'll have a separate topic about that sometime. But basically, make sure that they're relevant to your strategic objectives. So, if we're talking about the press, you've identified key outlets, find editors at those outlets and other outlets similar to those that matter to you the most. Influencers, if it's a game that is perhaps similar to something else that's popular, find streamers that you think might be interested in that. Find a variety streamers if it's something really unique and different. But start thinking about who you might want to work on with on the influencer side as much in the press. I would say over the last few years, we get asked a lot, what's causing conversion, what's causing people to add to their wish list on Steam and so forth. And influencers are every bit as important, if not more important, than a front page story through the press in terms of actual sales conversions. So if you want to sell a lot of units, you absolutely must have an influencer strategy as part of your PR strategy. All right. This is, generalities. It's a little different for every product, but these are just some general guidelines. Some products will plan as much as 12 to 18 months or even longer. Others, will have a 3-month quick start, but we generally like to recommend for a solid indie or even maybe a little bit bigger product that you're looking at 3 to 6 months prior to launch. You announce the game. And that's usually done with a press release, with a nice announcement teaser and a full-blown press kit. We always pitch all our press releases and all our major assets. And by pitching, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically what we try to do is we try to get a large outlet interested in either an exclusive or a breaking news where basically they get to publish the story maybe an hour or two before any other outlet. And if it's a great story and interesting news, all the other outlets will pick it up anyway. So you write the press release, you pitch, you get somebody locked down, they get the breaking news. And, back in the old day, an exclusive was really an exclusive. Nowadays, it's a little bit less so because on the internet, once one news outlet talks about something newsworthy, everybody else kind of can jump on that. So it's very hard to keep anything secret on the internet. But we still follow that practice to just lock this down to at least one large outlet. And then we do a broader distribution. So you should do something similar. It definitely makes a huge difference than just shooting a press release out there. At this point, I would recommend at least once a month, you release some sort of additional game information with strong visual assets. Again, could be a new feature that you roll out, a new character, or maybe a new map. But at least once a month, you want to stay on the radar, but you don't have to yet go into using an American football term, you don't have to go in a 2-minute offense yet to quickly score here. You can spread your assets out. All right. If you have playable code and that game as it looks right now will do you a favor, it's impressive, then it certainly makes sense to invite either broader media or select media for a first look, preview, or beta build. And the difference basically is between kind of a quick first look. It tends to be a smaller group of people. You could do it online, for example, invite editors to play the game with your development team if it's a multiplayer game, or you could play the game online for a editor and have them ask you questions about it, show them something unique, show it to them for the first time so they can kind of make a big splash about it. On the other side of that coin is a preview, and a preview is basically a unscored review. You want to do that early enough because the feedback you will get is highly valuable. It'll tell you what they like and didn't like about the game, and at this point there's not yet a critical score attached to it. It's just like, yeah, it looks promising or not so. They take it a little easy on you in most cases, and if you take that feedback to heart and fix it before the game launches, that helps tremendously. So again, that comes up to how mature is the code? Does the game look really good? If it's not really polished, I wouldn't do it yet. It's better than to hold back and wait until the game actually is ready to ship. One thing that we do and we recommend you do is amplify any positive press coverage, any major announcements, do that through your social media. Also implied here is your community. Use all of these channels to make sure awareness is out there of things that are happening related to your game. If PC Gamer says your game looks really interesting, that should be shared with your community. That should be going on your social media channel. All right. And continue to add relevant contacts to your press list. This is a steady process. Especially if you don't have a press list to start, you'll do a big building up front and then continue as to find new contacts. And we'll talk about press list in just a little bit. All right, 2 to 3 months before launch. Now I would simply pick up the pace. We recommend maybe about twice a month you do some sort of asset release and outreach. And at this point, definitely I would consider previews, I've already talked about that in terms of unscored reviews. One important note here is you don't want to get too close to launch for a preview, because if you're within about a month or 6 weeks of launch, a lot of editors, especially for the bigger outlets, will say, you know what, we're only gonna look at this game once. We're not gonna do a preview. We'd rather just wait till the game is completed and then do a scored review potentially. So we'll wait the 6 weeks or 4 weeks until the game is finished. So you just have to kind of find the right balance, but usually that 2 to 3 month window is a good one. Consider inviting influencers to some sort of limited pre-release let's play. Maybe you have a vertical slice, a short snippet of your game, or you can also limit to them. For example, if you have a linear game, you don't want them to play the whole game through before it releases or the plot is ruined. But you might want to say, hey, can we invite you to play this game, but please only do the first chapter or the first 2 chapters or only 20 minutes of gameplay. That's kind of a strategy that's different for each game, but those are just some things that we recommend. And continue to add relevant contacts to your press list. And if you're going to any trade shows, and really you can even do that earlier also, if there are any trade shows that you're going to, virtual or physical, definitely share that you're going to be at these trade shows and invite editors to check out the game and let consumers know that you're going to be at these trade shows to maximize your significant investment in time and money in trade shows. And again, amplify any positive coverage that you get through social media and to community. All right, month of launch. This is obviously the big one. Roll up your sleeves, no vacation, no downtime, long days, unfortunately, but this is kind of why you've been working so hard. So first thing we usually start with is a coming soon announcement. That's either a media alert or press alert, and press release. And it just simply is maybe a week or two before the game comes out. It's just a reminder saying this game is now imminently appearing. You'll be able to buy it soon. It's also a great opportunity for you to talk to editors and invite them to get a review code so they can start working in a review. It's a little bit of a balancing act, but you don't want to give out review code too late, but you also don't want to do it too soon. So usually we recommend somewhere in that 1 to 2 week window before launch is a great window of time to start getting editors to start looking at your game. Obviously, look at what else is coming out there. There's lots of outlets. Game Informer, for example, has an online calendar of upcoming releases that they keep updated and so forth. Lots of other outlets do the same thing. And check that release calendar. See what else is coming out. If something major is happening in the industry, for example, November, I hear there's some rumors about some new consoles and, of course, a bunch of new release titles. One, if you can avoid your launch during that window, that's really great. But also give yourself some extra time because editors are going to be busy looking at the big titles and the big news first, and you're going to get lost in the shuffle. So you want to kind of find that time. Just talked about press to review the game. What we do, just kind of a pro tip, is we end up using a form that we set up through Google, and we ask a number of verifying questions, and we direct editors and influencers to request the keys through that form. That makes sure we get consistently all the information we need. There's going to, once you start announcing a game and that you have keys, a lot of people will come out of the woodworks that are not legit, that just want a game code, that will either resell it or just want a free game. And so we've gotten pretty good at disrupting those fakes. But having a form certainly goes a long way, so you can find out, who they are, what outlet they're from, how big they are, and then you can establish your own policies as to is somebody too small or too big if you've got a limited number of keys. My personal advice is that really no outlet or no writer or journalist or influencer is too small to give a review key to. If you have them available, I know certain platforms you're kind of limited because you never know, where they will end up in the future. And we personally, we forged some great friendships and relationships with editors from very small blogs that now are heading up large top tier outlets. And frankly, it's just a good thing to do. And those people can become some of your biggest advocates because you showed them some kindness and you didn't give them the cold shoulder like, sometimes other, bigger publishers or bigger companies do because somebody is just not big enough right now. I also recommend that you, at this time, pitch some feature stories about the game, the team, or something relevant. Maybe that's happening in the news. This is not a gaming related thing. But for example, earlier this year, one of our clients, Main Gear, they make PCs, gaming PCs primarily. But because COVID was such an issue and respirators in particular, they actually retooled some of their factory to innovate some portable small respirators that could be used as emergency respirators. That, of course, at that time was a great subject because everybody was talking about what individuals are doing in their local community and globally to help fight COVID, this horrible pandemic that we're all facing. And so there was a lot of interest in that topic. So you just have to be creative and think about what's going on in the world. Don't be cheesy about it. Don't, just piggyback on something because it's popular. Make sure there's a really tight, genuine connection and a story and a thread that you can tell. But if it makes sense, by all means, do piggyback on that and reach out to editors that are covering a relevant topic. Once the game is available, you want to announce it. This is the day of launch. And a lot of times we'll also pitch that as an exclusive with an outlet. And then a big thing is to follow up with editors and influencers to ensure coverage. This goes all the way back to your coming soon, the keys maybe that have been out there now for 2 weeks. You want to follow up. And a lot of times, people say, well, how many times is too much or what's not enough? I've gone as far as followed up 7 times sometimes, or sent 7 pieces of news. And I start questioning myself, saying, am I starting to bug this person? Like, they're not responding. They're not covering the game. This is maybe the last time I reach out, and then I just mark them off our list for this product. They're just not interested. And then I'd get an email back and say, this is amazing. Wow. How come I've never heard of this game? And I'm kind of like, I don't know. You opened the other 6 emails, but it does happen. Editors, influencers, we're all busy. We all have lots of emails. So be persistent. Be polite. If somebody gets annoyed with you, or if somebody tells you, hey, I'm really not interested, respect them. But, as long as you're being respectful and to the point, follow up is not a bad thing. And again, amplify any positive coverage that you get through social media and community. Broken record here on this part. Do amplify your own achievements. If other people are saying great things about your game, let your community, your social media channels, your potential partners know about that. Okay. Embargo date. I don't know if you're familiar with what an embargo is. I mentioned it earlier briefly, but basically an embargo is an agreement between the press and either a PR agency or a publisher or a company that they will share something in secret, if you will, that is not to be written about or publicly discussed until a certain date and time. And so what we recommend for reviews is that you may send these keys out 2 weeks in advance, but you might have an embargo until the morning of launch at 9 a.m. And as part of the condition of getting a key to these editors, you make sure that they accept your embargo so that somebody doesn't do the release a week early, or the review a week early or a couple days early. Because one of the things you can do, for example, Steam is a great example. Steam tends to not typically promote games, individual games, especially new games, unless they see that there's a tremendous amount of interest, there's lots of sales, and it's very popular. And then they'll usually double down with additional marketing vehicles and promotional vehicles on Steam, unless you have an established history with Steam and a steady performance. So using an embargo date, you can cause most of your reviews to happen on one specific date, or at least not earlier than the date. There will be stragglers that will do the reviews after the fact, but you can use an embargo to kind of set when you want these reviews coming out. And as I said, we recommend that this happens the day of release, usually first thing that morning. Okay, after launch. Once you've launched, it's not over. There's still things you can do to help your game. For example, if you've got a lot of positive buzz, lots of great quotes, a lot of fan feedback, a lot of influencer snippets where they're really having fun with your game, consider mixing together some sort of a post-launch accolades trailer and share that. Continue to invite select press to review your game. If there's certain key outlets that does regular reviews and you feel like they really should have paid attention to your game, it's still okay even at and shortly after launch to invite them. An alternative is also, for example, if you launched a game on one platform months earlier or even a year earlier, and now you're launching it on a new platform, it's also perfectly okay to reach out to that press and offer them review code of either your old game or the new, by old game, I mean the previous platform, or the current new platform, depending on what their preferences are. Okay, continue to invite influencers to create video content. That is definitely something that can happen post-launch, particularly if you have post-launch content. But influencers definitely can contribute a lot by playing the game after it's launched and after it's available for consumers to purchase. Follow-up review stragglers, already talked about that a little bit. Don't just send your code out and assume that if you build it, they will come. Do check in with those people. Say, hey, I gave you a code to this game. It would really help us a lot if we could get your feedback and a review. Could you maybe tell us, if you're still planning to review it and when we might see a review? Maybe even say, hey, just in case we missed, your coverage, we'd like to share it with our stakeholders and our community. Could you share a link where you covered the game and so forth? Just be polite, be respectful. you have a symbiotic relationship with the press, so you don't want to annoy them or chase them down excessively. And sometimes, if it's relevant to your game, announce significant new game additions or expansion. If you're working on a DLC, if it's, for example, an MMO, you're going to continually have new content. And talked about subsequent platforms. If you, for some reason, maybe a platform exclusive, or maybe one platform is just not ready, or the game did so well on one platform, you go, why aren't we putting this on Switch? Then, maybe 6 months later or 3 months later, you're going to launch a Switch version, as an example. That's definitely something you want to announce after the launch of your first title. Okay. We'll talk a little bit here about tactics. I'm going to speed up a little bit so we have some time for some Q&A at the end. But basically, there's a couple different types of PR outreach, just sharing the nomenclature here. A press release, that's the most formal type. It's typically 1 to 2 pages, usually has 1 to 2 quotes in it. And those particular quotes are usually what gets picked up by the press. Some outlets will actually take press releases and literally copy and paste the entire content and share that as news. So everything that goes in a press release is basically fair game, and you want to follow a pretty tight format. A media alert is just a less formal, shorter version. You can often convey things a little more informally. For example, you can use it when you want to invite the press to an event and so forth, and things that you want to do, that you want to share to invite a greater conversation. For example, if there's a new trailer out and there's not much else, you can talk about that. But we've also had a lot of fun with media alerts. For example, a couple years ago, we had a game where the character was kind of having a psychosis, and he was felt like he was being persecuted, and so we actually wrote a media alert to the press to invite them to a press event in the tone of the main character, in sort of broken sentences, with him clearly showing that he's paranoid, and inviting the press not to tell anybody about this note that he sent to him. So you can have some fun with it, because remember, the whole point of PR is to stand out and get the positive attention of press and also influencers. Pitch is a very short message, a paragraph or two. It can also be a phone call. A lot of times, pitches are used with a press release. So, for example, when I pitch an exclusive, or I have a story idea that I think a particular outlet would be interested in, I'll say, hey, we have this story about this topic. We'd like to give you the exclusive. Are you interested? And we just teaser it with a paragraph or two about what it's about. And then the editor usually will come back, say, sure, I'll honor your embargo. I'll keep this, confidential until we decide whether you're going to give me the story and when I can run with it. And then they might ask you for the full press release or a trailer or whatever asset you have. And then you sort of negotiate with that outlet to give them the exclusive, or to set up an interview so that they can do a full story and so forth. So a pitch is a very powerful tool, short. It's like a personal email, usually even addresses an editor directly. And usually when we do pitches, we do it to 100 people or less. Sometimes I'll only pitch 1 or 2 editors, because I already have a specific outlet in mind. Or our team knows enough about an editor that we know this is their interest area. This is a game type they're very excited about. Let's pitch them first, because they're going to do a great job with that. Okay. AP wire distribution, not as important. It's basically a third-party network. There's tens of thousands of newspapers that are on the part of the Associated Press. And for some things like financial news, key partnerships, if you're a publicly traded company, you want to have things out on the Associated Press. Most of the coverage that results there is a verbatim pickup of your press release. So that's why it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of editorial value. Okay. Press releases. I'm going to kind of go quickly through this part here. We've already talked about it. This is just a difference of, it is nuanced. Different people use press releases and media alerts for different things. Generally speaking, press releases are for more significant things and often are used verbatim. And here's some things that should go into a press release. You want to have them professionally written, precise spelling and grammar. The subject line is key really for all outreach. It's key. If the subject line isn't compelling and interesting, they're not going to open your email. They're not going to read your press release. The first paragraph is the most important of a press release. All the core info should go into that in an easy to digest way. You can then use the other paragraphs to elaborate, but that intro, the topic, the first paragraph are the most important. If you've got hard facts or statistics, numbers, quantitative, how big an industry is, how big a trend is, that's all important things that can help you get an editor's attention. Not everyone uses this. Bullet lists are great. They really help readability in an otherwise wall of text. So for example, if you have like 3 key features you want to call out about a game or about somebody that you want to have interviewed, that maybe are topics that you can put in a bullet list. Same thing if it's an event, the when, where details, those all beg for a bullet list for easy readability. Quotes, these are important because the quotes, again, usually get picked up directly. So you want to tailor those carefully. Just picture the quote as possibly standing on its own in an article or being a pull quote being pulled out. So you want to make sure that the company involved, the person involved, their role, and what the key message, any brands are included in that quote so that it makes sense being read just the quote and nothing else. Definitely have your assets and press kit linked. Very important. People forget that sometimes. It seems obvious, but your contact info so the press can follow up. Anything you want to know about your website, social media links, links to, for example, your Steam page where the product is and so forth. We'll go on to media alerts. Again, these are just a little more informal. Media alert, very similar, a little more casual, typically a little shorter. Again, engaging subject line, front load the key information. Having this who, what, where, when, and why, the 5 W's answered is important. Again, you can use bullet lists for easy reading. Your contact info. Again, assets and press kit, don't forget those. Social media links. Keep it short and to the point. Editors are super busy. If you can make a great 2-paragraph or 3-paragraph media alert, you're halfway there. Okay, pitches. I'm going to just go over those real quick. Share news under embargo, secure an exclusive or breaking news, invite media or influencers to try a game, offer an interview or some sort of feature story, or sometimes a save the date. For example, if we're going to go do a press tour, we'll say, hey, we're going to be in San Francisco on this week. You know, would that work for you? Can we count on you? We'll send you more details. Don't plan anything right now. You know, you're not going to want to miss it. That's kind of a pitch. Okay. Talk briefly about distribution tools. I'm just going to fill this page in. So distribution tools are basically ways that you can get your message out. So standard email account is great for individual emails. It's great for readability because it tends to not get filtered out as promotional email or spam. It looks like, and it did actually come directly from you. It is a little tricky to do this at scale with a lot of contacts. So if you're only going to reach out to 25 or 30 editors, for example, then it's perfectly fine. Just be careful because if you send hundreds of emails, sometimes your email server will shut you down for a little while. And the big rookie mistake, do not ever copy your press contacts in CC on an email. We've seen it so many times. It's an industry joke. And then people start replying all to those emails and it's just cacophony. Whatever you do, never ever be that person that posted editors' contact emails in CC. If you want to do it that way, put it in BCC. Again, I think the other options are better. We use a tool called Mailshake. It's sort of an in-between tool. It allows, it's more of a bulk email sending tool. It has more of an email look, and it allows you to target larger lists. It allows you to customize things. So for example, the open line might be, hey, Mike, we'd really love to see this on PC Gamer, or other custom things that you can fit in. So it just gives you a little bit, if you've done any kind of email marketing, there's tools out there. Mailshake is one that's very affordable that we like, that's very easy to use. And then MailChimp, there's a dozen, probably hundreds of these that you could use. It's a full-blown database. It's also good because it allows you a lot of metrics about who opened your emails. For example, if certain editors never open your email, you might want to think, do I want them on my list, or am I approaching them right? Things like that. The biggest downside to that, it also is that it can come across sometimes as either spammy, like if you go too newsletter format, if you make your emails too pretty, if you put too many links in there, put too many attachments in, it will probably end up either in promotional emails with Gmail or the worst in spam. So you just need to kind of find a happy balance with that. Okay. And happy to give more recommendations. These are just 3 tools that we use. Okay. I will go through this as quickly. So my team told me this was a lot of information to get through, so I'll know next time. Definitely quicker than or slower than I planned. Let's talk about finding press contacts. So I'm just going to throw these out here. When you're talking about trying to figure out what press you want to communicate with, it's best to be clear in who you want to reach and think about what their audience is. So when you're talking about games media, just a simple example, if you have a mobile game, it really probably doesn't make a lot of sense to reach out to an outlet that only covers PC games or a Nintendo Switch heavily focused site, because they're simply not going to cover a mobile game unless there is some tie-in or there's plans to also do a game on that platform. Same thing with esports. It can both be a pro and a con. For example, a VR game that's PC based, PC outlets will cover it. But there's also particular VR outlets that might cover that. Think about your territory. Where in the world is the game available? You don't need to reach out to everybody if your game is only available in a couple countries or only in one language. Genre specific. There are, if you have a point-and-click adventure game, for example, there are sites out there that are leaders in covering point-and-click adventures. There's also specific editors that you want to just think about their roles. For example, a news editor is not going to cover the same thing as a reviews editor at IGN. So you just want to make sure you're talking to the right people. And that proves true for all of these other types of outlets as well. And the last one is probably an important one. If your game has some sort of tie-in into music or into a military theme, there are outlets specifically to those markets that you might not normally think about as gaming outlets, but that might cover you. So maybe those are some areas you want to look at. I'll share this deck later on, but here is basically a few ways that you can find press contacts. Check the outlet, their About Us or contact page. Look on social media, LinkedIn. You can search, for example, by Wall Street Journal and get a bunch of people and see what their roles are. Twitter has people that self-identify. Muckrack is a site where editors put their profiles. Hunter.io lets you find people at different outlets. For example, you type in Wall Street Journal, you'll get hundreds of people that work there, and then you'll have to do some homework. We use Meltwater as a professional tool that lets us find editors. For example, if somebody wrote about one similar topic, we might find editors that way. And then if you go to any events, virtual or otherwise, you should always request the official press or media list. That's a great way to get your press list started as well. With that being said, be aware of restrictions like GDPR, that's the European constraints, on opt-ins and so forth. It's always best if you're very polite, you reach out and you make sure that the person that you're reaching out to is okay with you sending them press releases and so forth. Make it a symbiotic relationship. Once you have their agreement, their consent, much better response than if you're just, hammering press releases time and time again at them. Okay, press kit, I'll look at that real quick. Bottom line on that is a few great assets are better than tons of so-so assets. Your logos, key art, some dynamic screenshots, think of diversity. We sometimes use animated GIFs just because they quickly show some basic action that you can also sometimes embed those in your media alerts or your press alerts. At least one trailer, we suggest somewhere between 30 seconds to 2 minutes. If you don't know where to get started with a trailer, honestly, I would look out there and see what some of your favorite trailers look like, what they're doing, what's working, why you like them. And when you're first getting started, mimic some of those trailers for your own game until you sort of get your own cadence and figure out what you like. Additional optional trailers you can include in the press kit for added value, but you can also sometimes have to hold those back for additional PR outreach, especially if you can't make a lot of trailers. And then B-roll is something it's kind of a nice to have. It sort of makes you show you stepped up your game. It's roughly 5 to 20 minutes of raw footage that can be gameplay, your studio, your team, your area, different things, that sort of background things that editors can cut up and edit and play while maybe they're talking about your game. So you don't have to worry about making it pretty. Make sure it's good footage, but it's just raw footage that somebody else will edit. And again, less is better. Less great stuff is better than having lots of mediocre stuff. A fact sheet should be included. Here's sort of the bare bones contents of what a fact sheet should include. Again, it should all fit on one page. This is also the content that should be on your Steam page, for an example. Okay. Talk quickly about PR costing. There's really not an easy answer for that. Here are just some things to think about that could influence the cost of a PR campaign. I'll leave that up here for you guys so I don't have to read it for you. And ultimately, the right answer is you get what you pay for. And let's talk briefly about DIY or hiring somebody, and that can be a freelancer or an agency. If you have somebody with skills, you don't have to pay an extra salary or retainer. You own the press list. So next time you make another game, the contacts you can follow up. It's generally easier to get internal approvals. And that leads to a greater flexibility in terms of your timeline. So if the game gets delayed or a video is not quite ready, you don't have an external third party that may have already queued up your press release for the next morning. And your internal staff will typically know your game or product better than anyone on the outside. If you have a great agency, they'll make a great effort, but we're not working with your game every single day like you guys are. Okay? All right. Downsides to doing your own PR. You must have have to secure your own press contacts, and press contacts change all the time. You only have one individual typically that can do that instead of a whole well-rounded team. And that ties into the next point, which is that a whole team will have more experience and more contacts across the industry. And you have to think about you're paying one person a salary with potentially benefits versus a short-term project-based expenditure that you won't need, after the game launches. And really important, I think the most important one, it's a lot more work and time than most think. If you do it well, it really is a full-time job and then some. Okay, and I'll just share this. If you're working with a PR agency, or if you're thinking about picking one, here are just some suggestions that we make that are the criteria for whether you found the right agency to work with you. Okay, and this would normally be my Q&A. I think I'm pretty much out of time. That's fine. That's fine. So here is my contact information. Mario at UberStrategist is probably the easiest. And if you want to shoot me an email, my telephone numbers are there as well. If you have some specific questions, if you need help with a project, even if it's just some advice, happy to help you. And if there's anything that we could do better about this presentation, or anything you wish I talked about that I didn't, also welcome that kind of feedback. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You guys have an absolutely great day, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. And thanks, Games Jam Plus, for having me.
Fala pessoal, aqui quem fala é Marcelo Figueiredo, diretor da Radioativa Produtora, uma produtora de som com mais de 25 anos, que desde 2010 trabalha com produção de som para games, fazendo trilha sonora original, sound design e implementação, localização e voz original. Estou aqui para convidar vocês para o Esquenta Gamejam+2020, para o painel Trilha Sonora e Voz Original para Games, comigo e com o ator, diretor e dublador Cristiano Torreão. Lá vamos conversar um pouco sobre o processo de construção de trilha sonora para games e também como fazemos a voz original em inglês e português. Estão curiosos? Então não percam esse painel. Anotem aí, dia 8 de outubro, às 18h30, horário de Brasília. Um grande abraço e até lá!